Today's topic is systems for success. Organizations are made up of three key ingredients, I believe: talent, culture, and systems. We've talked about talent on previous calls, how to attract talent, the struggle for attracting talent, how to retain talent. We talked about culture and the importance of culture and how to implement it. Lastly, it's systems. What is your system? What is your operating system? I work with many CEOs, small business owners, and I get nervous when they come to a meeting with a legal pad and they come with no legal pad and ask for a piece of paper, or they start typing it in their phones. It makes me very nervous. I started using the Franklin Planner in 1993, and I still use it as part of my system. And that's just basically a day timer on steroids. But I was blessed to play at University of North Carolina basketball, and Dean Smith had a system. He had talent, he had culture, and he had a system. And that systems helps you run an efficient organization, and also gives you something to, I think, recruit to. We're blessed today to have a special guest, longtime friend and Tar Heel alum, Allen Cobb. He is a professional EOS implementer. He was introduced to EOS in 2011. EOS stands for the Entrepreneur's Operating System. And when I first heard that, I thought it was a technical system, like Microsoft or iOS. But this is more of a system on how to organize your company, from flowcharts to accountability to defining roles. He was introduced to EOS in 2011. He's utilized it for 8 years. After 2 successful exits, he decided to become an EOS implementer, and helps companies reach their full potential. I'd like to welcome Allen Cobb to the show. Allen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Coach. Glad to be here.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about what system were you using before EOS, if you could call it a system?
Well, that's probably the easiest way to characterize it. We found ourselves, certainly a lot of conversations with my business partner back then. We were at a stage where we were probably between 15 and 20 employees. We were a venture-backed software company. We had just raised about a $6.5 million Series A round. And so people were starting to show up, and we had a lot more expectations. And the reality, Coach, is we realized that we had, in the absence of a formal operating system for our business, we had kind of a homegrown, we were attempting to build a strong leadership team. We were attempting to set goals. We were attempting to motivate the team and build a vision, but it was just kind of a hodgepodge flavor of the month, try some things to see what would stick. And inevitably, a lot of stuff was fizzling out, and we were getting very frustrated by that. I'll give you one great example. I remember vividly, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, whatever time it was, sending a email to my business partner. Hey, I just read this Harvard Business Review article on how to run an interesting performance review. And he's like, all right, let's do it. And, for the next 6 weeks, we tried it, but it just kind of fizzled out. And when we were introduced in our world to EOS, although there are different options, there are several options available. We realized, and this was kind of the turning point, inflection point, where we realized the value. We were spending an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how to run a great company, rather than actually having a framework to allow us to spend all of our time just running a great company, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It does. What were your main frustrations, besides some of the things you mentioned about your old system?
Well, the flavor of the month certainly was one where we were taking all these individualized efforts that was not part of a holistic way that we were running the organization. Not the same sheet of music that and everybody rowing in the same direction. And so as we tried to deliver those messages to our greater organization, and at this point, we're now 40, 50 employees and colleagues. A lot of things are just kind of, dead on arrival. Like you get in that blank stare. What exactly, are you talking about? How does this relate to other things? So certainly the flavor of the month is a frustration. And then I think, ultimately, one of the main things that an operating system does for your organization is it's a system to harness human energy. And so on the people side of things, and as we know, whether your example with, playing on the Tar Heels or running a great company, any kind of championship caliber organization, people are just a huge part of that. We need the people and we need them all on the same page. And once we were able to feel like we had a much clearer message and everybody was responding to that, by seeing that they all bought in, that's when we really start seeing things start to click. So we overcame that frustration as well.
How were you introduced to EOS?
We ultimately, I actually myself first attended a seminar talk kind of a opportunity that was specifically designed around it. And after that, we reached out to someone in our local area that, in my same role now, and we brought an implementer on board to help us kind of be our coach, our facilitator, our teacher to teach us the system along the way and bring our leadership team on board. So that's how we first were introduced.
I'm going to ask those of you that can, I'd love to have you on video because I'd love to see your beautiful faces, your facial reactions, 50% of communications, body language. And so I'd love to thank you, Patrick. Love the name, by the way, Patrick. That's my confirmation name, my grandfather's name, Patty Cleary. So if you can show your face, I appreciate it very much. And again, thank you. We have 45 people on this call. It's so exciting to see some new faces. And those of you that are new, please put your name and email into the chat. Allen, give me an aha moment. Like everyone, when there's change, there's doubt. So, and if you're the one that's encouraging the company to use EOS, you want to make sure, and those of you that remember Animal House, you don't want to be John Belushi running out the door and looking around behind you and seeing that no one's following you, right? So you want people to have enthusiasm. And I'm sure that you were nervous at first, but what was the aha like, okay, this is going to work, where everyone got confident that this EOS system was the right thing for your company?
I remember it vividly. And it's still something that I see teams that I'm working with today struggle with. And it's around the concept of not being able to put the toothpaste back in the tube when it comes to transparency in the organization. People have a fear that once information is potentially shared organization-wide, that we can't get that back. And we learned very quickly, the more transparency that we were willing to share with the organization around our plan, around our vision, around, our mission, vision, values, but also, that goes down to revenue and profit numbers and goals that we had. We shared everything with everybody. And once we started doing that, we saw that the true buy-in absolutely just accelerated at a rate that we'd never seen before. It's also important that once you do that, to realize and recognize that we wanted all of our colleagues to buy into that organization with the same level of ownership that we did, to really believe and to really value where we were going. But also by providing that transparency, there were a couple people that self-selected out of the organization because they did not feel like that necessarily was aligned with what they thought. And you know what? About 2 years later, I have had a couple conversations, or 2 years, 3 years down the road, where someone actually, called me back and thanked me for that and said, in the long run, I'm in a much better place. Y'all's organization was in a much better place. And so I think oftentimes as leaders, we lose sight of that too, that we want this to not only, breed those A players, those superstars, but also help us very quickly in a timely fashion, be able to allow individuals to potentially self-select out if this is not the right place for them.
Well, that's one of the many benefits I believe, when you have a good culture and good systems attached at the hip, and they're different. So systems and culture are different, in my opinion. But the better culture, the better systems you have, you will attract elite talent. If your systems are elite and your culture is elite, you will also scare away the C players, because they don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to be part of a good culture. They want to whine. They want to complain. They want to, be in the corner talking about the boss behind their back. They want to gossip. And when they see a system like this and they know they're going to be held to a high standard, they vote with their feet and they're out the door. But that's a good thing. We have on this call business owners, academicians, we have basketball coaches. So how can this system work in a myriad of industries? So, my background's basketball coaching. Could I implement this if I was the head coach at the University of North Carolina?
I think as long as you're bought in and you know that you're willing to do the work, that it absolutely will work. That's where we see one of the biggest challenges. Like I said earlier too, though, and I want to be real clear on this, EOS has worked really well for me, but it is not the only option. I mean, there are certain flavors of business operating systems, and one's worth exploring as well. There's Rockefeller habits, scaling up, holacracy, some of the Pat Lencioni's work with the advantage, and some really good tools out there. I think, Coach, if anything, to go back to that, so I think the short answer is yes, if you're bought in and you can see that it's the right fit. But the one message to take away from today is you got to pick something. You've got to pick something, and more importantly, you need to narrow that to one. You really need to have a single operating system, because you want people to be, you want one voice, you want one vision, you want one team, you want everybody speaking the same language and knowing what that means. Mm-hmm. And then I do think that, what you mentioned around, talent, culture, and systems, it's really, if you go back to it, all three of those really need to be strong, but all three of those will breed strength in the other one as well. I mean, if you can help walk us back to 1982 in the Superdome before you're about to take the court to play the Hoyas, I'm pretty sure at that point, Coach Smith didn't say, you know what, let's just go with our God-given talent and just go out there and give it a good shot. And y'all come back in here at halftime. I'm just going to stay in here. Y'all just come back and report to me how that's going. I mean, there was a plan, right? There was a system. In fact, down to the wire, although Michael got the shot in the corner, I think there were some other options on that play too, down to every little bit. So sorry for all the non-Tar Heels. I did have to bring a little bit of it out. But
I appreciate it. He's referencing a game 40 something years ago. The University of North Carolina played Georgetown in the finals, and the legendary coach Dean Smith, who had an unbelievable system and a system that was replicated by Roy Williams and now Hubert Davis. And, I utilized it, and it gives you structure and efficiencies. And I think it really just streamlines things. I would encourage at this point for some people, if you have a question, raise your emoji hand and we'll get you in the queue, because we have Allen till for another about 10 minutes. And for those of you who have some questions, would love for you to ask Allen questions. And welcome Sam, Fernando, Kenny Stevens. Kenny was a former manager for me at FAU with Rex Walters, Mike Thorne, Anthony Danino, Pete Hawkins, Dozy. I mean, it's really cool. Matt Hanlon, really cool to see some new faces on the call. Is that Castiglione? Did I say that right?
Castiglione.
Gotcha. We have to represent the other side. We've got too many Irish Catholic guys. We need some paisans on the call. That's awesome. So thank you for calling. Where are you calling in from?
Atlanta, Georgia.
All right, great. Welcome to the show. We have Chuck Cooper, it looks like, and then Brian Moran. Chuck, fire away for Allen.
Allen, thank you so much for being on the call on the webcast this morning. I wanted to ask with regard to EOS. I oftentimes see within small and mid-sized companies really being challenged in the area of performance management. And I'm not a believer in doing annual performance reviews. I think there's much better ways to do it, but I wanted to get your input on how you see EOS being able to be a tool to improve that, performance review process.
Well, at the end of the day, EOS and most all operating systems are about driving accountability through the organization. The reality is doing some of the vision casting and talking about where we're going to go as an organization. In 3 years, we're going to be a $50 million company. In 10 years, we're going to be a $100 million company, whatever it might be. That's almost perceived to be some of the fun work. But we take an approach that before we do that, we're going to set an accountability structure in the organization. We're going to know who's doing what and why. We're going to be able to drive execution and performance through the organization first, with the theory being that if we don't do that, it doesn't really matter what we say we're going to do as far as where we're going. And so back to the question, then, inherently in that is that we have metrics and scorecards on a weekly basis down to the individual level that we want to make sure that is driving accountability to the individual contributor. And they see what their contributions are doing or helping impact this larger vision of where we're heading. And then specifically around performance management and the annual kind of performance review that you referenced. One of our tools is just, in addition to any kind of daily or weekly huddles, potentially the teams are a part of, every individual in the organization should be a part of a quarterly meeting, manager and direct report kind of thing, much more of an informal, what's working, what's not working, minor course correction types of things. And we structure that around, the values of the organization and how you're living those values, roles that you might play in your seat, that you're accountable for, and ultimately any of the priorities that you might be working on behalf of the organization. So every 90 days, everybody should have the ability to have their voice be heard. And this is one of the times that the organization is actually listening, where we've turned that dial on and we've said, listen, take advantage of this. We want your voice to be heard, and we want to see how we can do some minor course corrections to keep us on track. So that's one specific tool that we utilize that goes right in line with your thought of it not being as much of a rigid and performance review on the annual basis. Sometimes it's still done on an annual basis, but the other 3 quarters of the year much more informal.
Thank you very much for your question, Chuck Cooper. Brian Moran, and then Chuck Alexander, and then Adam. They're in the queue. Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Matt. Allen, this is great. I got a couple of part question for you. Is there an ideal company size to which you would start the EOS system, right? 5 employees or 10 employees. The other part is, when would you introduce it? I mean, would a startup company be using it? Would they implement it right away? Or is there a certain threshold that you get to from a revenue standpoint? The last question I have is, what about contingency planning, right? So how do you build in your EOS something like COVID, which is an extreme case, but in any entrepreneurial company, there's no straight line to success. So talk a little bit about, you talked about the quarterly reviews, but how do you build in, when things don't go your way, when you lose that big account or you lose that star salesperson?
So Alan, I think the first part was, when can you implement this? Is this better for a team of 5 or a team of, more than 100? Should you implement it from the beginning when you're starting your company? And then what are the contingency? How do you plan for the unexpected?
If I was to define a sweet spot for you, we would tell you it's 10 to 250, maybe pushing 500 employees. With that said, Brian, I've had a team as small as 3. All 3 of those were kind of founding leadership team members, and they knew that the next wave of people and talent was going to be more individual contributor level, and they were just ready to do things the right way. They didn't want to come to an arbitrary point in time. So as long as the owner founders are bought in and understand the value, it can work it down to 1 or 2, but certainly 10 is where that you usually reach that first inflection point. As far as types of companies, 100% totally agnostic to industry, has no 85-90% of what we do run in any organization is exactly the same. It's actually almost hard to believe, even in from my point of view now. I get to work with a lot of different companies across all kinds of industries, and to see the similarities is really pretty crazy. But again, just to companies I've helped, I've worked with a company that was been in business for 6 months, and one that was founded in 1905. Where 2 brothers a couple brothers have taken over the next generation, and kind of felt like that they really need to propel themselves into the next phase of the organization. So sometimes there's a little bit of a misconception with entrepreneurial being in the name, that it's a startup thing. Not that at all. It's just alignment around the team and organization. And then your last part about contingency planning, COVID actually is a great example of this. So when we get into vision building, think about it this way: we've got to paint a picture into the future, but we have to map a path back to the present. And the only way we can get to the future is by starting at the present, and then starting to inch our way towards the future state of where we want the organization to be. And so we throw out on a 10-year horizon, what's our big overall goal that we want this organization, one goal that everybody can align around. Then on a 3-year horizon, where are we from a revenue standpoint, a profit standpoint? What are the key measurables we need to think about? What are our goals on a 3-year horizon? We do that exercise on a 1-year plan, and then we do that for every 90 days. So now you see how we're mapping this path back to the present. And the point of that background, Brian, is that then in a contingency planning situation, if we really feel like, all right, well, here's our 100% plan. Well, do we also have a 50 or 75% plan? If it's that staring us in the face that we might need to do that, we potentially have to have 2 plans, because we say, at 100%, this is what people look like and resources look like, and our systems and technology and our spend and our marketing. But at 75%, it needs to look like this, and 50% it would have to look like this. And so I saw several companies we facilitated through that type of a discussion, because there was that much of an unknown out there, and we could be in the position to then make key decisions based on what played out in the market, which was in several scenarios proved to be time that was very well spent.
Well, thank you, Alan. Brian, thank you for the question. We have 2 questions, and Alan, you've got to go here shortly. So let's, quick, Chuck, a quick question for Alan. Chuck?
Which Chuck? I didn't know there's multiple.
Okay,
Myself?
Chuck, there's only one Chuck in my, Chuck, there's just one Chuck, like the Chuckster from Garden City, Long Island. Go ahead, Chuck.
The right side of the tracks.
Yeah.
Hey, Alan, thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate you coming on. I have a question on a real-time scenario that's playing out for me at this moment. I've been a serial entrepreneur, constantly putting stuff up on the wall to try to make things happen. One of the things I've recently been working on for about the last year with a couple of colleagues of mine that are based out of China is we were looking at an existing product and looking to fill a niche that we thought was unexplored. The product is electronic swipe wipes, okay? And obviously we thought about it coming out of the pandemic and then everyone with the touchy-feely and everything like that. And our model was to focus on the mom buying when she's shopping at a Walmart or a Target. She's shopping, impulse buying, whether it's at an end cap or at checkout. Okay, so we created this product called Swipe Wipes. We had its sampling done over in China, and did a white sheet and all this stuff to put it together. But I've had no real experience, and I didn't anticipate the call I got 3 days ago from Walmart that they're interested in looking at this product. And they've asked for samples. They've asked for the formulation. One of my partners is a chemist that's got about 15 different patents, and she's the one that created the formulation for this particular electronic white that serves, it's obviously for kids, for moms, on the go type of thing. And Walmart wants to take a look at it. They've asked me to send samples. They've asked us to send our whole profile and what we're doing.
Chuck, what's the question, Chuck? Come on, buddy. What's the
Oh,
question?
I'm asking,
You're
how do I
killing me.
handle something like this? And do you have an answer for me on how I could proceed or how I should do something? I apologize.
Well, I would boil it down to one thing. If in any strong organization, I want you to really know what your focus is. Like, what is your core focus? What's your true kind of purpose, cause, passion? And when a big opportunity like this hits the desk, you want to be able to put it through that lens of not only what are we truly focusing on, what are we trying to deliver to the market, as well as from a marketing strategy. What are the unique propositions? It can't be all things to all people. We can ultimately take on potential deals like this that sink the ship, and we got to be very careful of that. So we want to have those lens of understanding exactly kind of what is our North Star, what's the litmus test of making sure we have the right focus on the things. In our software business, we worked with schools. We had a RFP come out from the LA Unified School District, ISD, and it would have been about 750,000 kids, and they had a specific price point that they wanted. We could not deliver it at that. As cool as that sounded on the surface to get one of the biggest districts in the country, we actually declined the RFP because it did not fit in what we were trying to deliver. So I think there's some tough love there, and it could be right, it could be wrong, but it shouldn't be, let's go jump into it head first because of the sex appeal of it's Walmart, and it could be a huge deal if it's not the right timing and the right fit.
That's a great answer. And just
Fantastic.
for the
Thank you.
audience,
That's
especially the new members, Chuck and I are from Long Island. We have a love-hate relationship, so we love to hate each other. So I just want you to know that I'm not going to treat every other caller with that kind of indignity. Just Chuck. The Chuckster deserves that kind of approach. So don't be shy in raising your hand as a result.
Did he go to Duke? Did he go to
No,
Duke?
he couldn't get in. He couldn't get in.
Yeah, that's right. I couldn't get in.
Yeah. So, Alan, for due time, Adam Zimbrowski, one quick question for Alan, because Alan needs to get off the call here in probably 2 minutes.
I can get 8:40, 8:45. We're good.
Okay.
I'll be quick and concise, which is very difficult for me. Usually my questions are about 2.5 minutes long, but I don't want to be yelled at by Matt. So I'm kidding. No. I want to thank international best-selling author Chuck Cooper for inviting me on the call. Chuck, thank you. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm in the hotel, hospitality, and tourism business, right? So, Alan, I'm coming from the perspective of working with multiple companies that manage multiple properties throughout the United States, with about 60 or 70% of their workforce being hourly workers, non-management. The people that I talk to are the companies that lead those hotels and restaurants throughout the nation, but they're not located near those properties. So they might be based in Atlanta with properties throughout the United States, right? So a common resistance to talking to them about a system is time. So when you've got the attitude of a buy-in from the CEO or president saying, I want to do this, I want to implement EOS, but I just don't have the time and I don't have anybody on my team that's able to spend even 10 hours a week on this, how do you respond to something like that related to bandwidth, which is last couple of years, everyone's talking about their bandwidth being completely filled, right? So do you have a regular response to that, that they just don't have the time?
Failing to plan is planning to fail. It's pretty simple. So I totally side with you here, Adam. I mean, that's a real thing. I can tell you from every organization that has had that as a challenge, and the reality is any company could come up with a scenario where it's not a good time to start something like this, but the best time, was yesterday at the same time. So every organization that has been able to take that leap, if they are bought in and understand the impact, the irony is the person's life that's going to become the easiest, have the most change and impact are the ones that are showing you the resistance. And so some of that might be a little bit of a sell and getting everybody on board. Hopefully across that portfolio, maybe there's just a way to get one good win for you that you can then reference as an example to everybody else, and have that kind of catalyst or guinea pig be the catalyst for change across the rest. That's where I would focus my energy, is get that one champion. If that's a way to break it down, and then take that back to the rest of the folks and say, look, they had the same challenge, they had the same concern, but we buckled down, we got the work done, and here's where we are now.
Well, Adam,
Thank you.
good question. Thank you very much. Alan, where do people find you, and where can they learn more about EOS?
So I'll be happy, obviously, Coach, if you want to send email and phone out after this, if anybody wants to get in touch, email is allen.cobb@eosworldwide.com. And my phone number, 910-409-7467. And I'd be happy to also be as a resource. I know a lot of people are coming in from different locations today. I'm very fortunate to have a great network of colleagues all around the country. There's about 350 of us in the US, specifically a little over 400, around 450 around the world. So, feel free, if there's any interest to learn more, start with me. And if there's somebody local in the area, depending on where you are, I'm happy to get you in touch with them as well. Great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. One other thing I'd like to add, so many of my clients were using EOS that I needed to learn more. I think a great starting ground is reading the book Traction. Is that fair to say, Alan?
That's fair to say. And as a follow-up, I'd be happy to send anybody a copy that wants one. If you shoot me an email, I'd be happy to send you a book.
Whoa. I paid for my book, Alan. You're sending out freebies? Wow. All right. Maybe I'll get a credit. Maybe you'll credit me my, $19.99. I've got it on the book form, and I've got it on the audio. That's how much that I've listened to it or read it 3 times already. It is a go-to, in my opinion, for all my clients, and it just puts you in position to be successful. Alan, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and we will send out your contact information to everybody that's on the call, and hopefully you'll get a few calls on that. Thank you for your time this morning. Good luck on your call.
Appreciate it. See y'all. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Coach. Thank you.
Jeff, I'm sorry we didn't get to you, but out of respect for Alan's schedule, what question did you have? I'm a believer. I've helped companies implement this. What questions might you have of EOS? All right, you got to unmute. There we go. Okay.
So I'm in the healthcare space and trying to create alignment specifically between employers and hospitals and their providers, those that take care of their employees. And healthcare has become such a complicated space, and it's really controlled by several key forces, that being the large insurance companies, the large hospital systems, and probably you'd have to put big pharma in there as well. And so if I'm in the midst of trying to create alignment and innovation for those that want to see that alignment take place. And so as you do that, you can't boil the ocean and do everything at once. You've got to begin to sequence what you're doing so that you can get the traction that you speak of. Mm-hmm. And so what I was going to ask Allen was, is there a sort of a way of looking at this so that you can build, faith and trust in moving to a new place? Because most people are very unhappy with how healthcare works. They'd like to see it move. I'm trying to create, and I think I'm in the process of creating a framework to do that. And so I was gonna throw that at him and give him something to think about. And I'm happy to give it to you and the others on this call.
That's a big question. Anybody on the call have a response for Jeff, especially some of the first timers that might have experience in a big operation like that or dealing with the healthcare industry? The only thing I say, it's complicated. I will say, just you as a small part of that big ecosystem, you can only control what you can control. You're not going to impose this on outside institutions, outside organizations. The only thing I would say is embrace a system, be really good at it so that it's so attractive that other companies that you're working with want to do what you do. That's the only answer I have, because you're not going to get, to me, big hospitals to change.
No,
they've got to want to change.
Yeah, so there was a really great Harvard business guy that wrote a lot about this. He recently passed, Clayton Christensen, and he talked about the fact that folks in the status quo, they know they have to innovate, but they want to they like this thing called sustainable innovation. Those of us that are out there trying to break everything and create a better status quo, we want to disrupt everything. So, as I think about how to build this framework, I think, you have to start small. You have to start with those parts of the system that the big boys are really kind of leaving alone. One thing that I'll mention that I'm working hard to sort of expand on is that in India, what is happening there, and I had this conversation with a software company just recently based over there that works with a lot of the Fortune 500, and in India, one of the wealthier guys over there has decided that the way to solve healthcare in India, which has three times our population at least, and so healthcare is even more critical over there than it is here. And they've decided this wealthy guy is putting his money into private sector diagnostic labs and then building innovations around that. Mm-hmm. So that the data-driven healthcare that we all talk about wanting to have in this country, could potentially happen over there with a formula like this. And so I'm sort of working on that same kind of idea, because we have got to create a different sort of framework from the one that we have today, because the one we have today, we're just going to keep getting the same thing.
I agree, but I think that's probably beyond this call. I don't think anyone on this call is going to fix the healthcare system
No, I
right
know.
now. So Jeff, I appreciate it. I appreciate that very much. Anybody run EOS on this call? It says Brandon. Now it doesn't look like Brandon. So tell me.
No. So I'm actually an EOS implementer like Allen, but I brought it into our furniture company. And for me, before I became an implementer, and for me, what was so transformational were a couple of things. One, this idea of a visionary and an integrator within your system. Because so often a visionary gets trapped in that integrator seat. And that for us in a small family business was absolutely transformational. So that was one thing.
Can you please state your name and what was the business you were in?
Of course, yes. My name is Brandon Blell. I'm here in the Charlotte area.
Okay.
And I started my career in the tech space where I was growing really rapidly, had some wonderful things. The company that I was with before was a family-owned furniture company called Stanford Furniture, and we since sold that to another EOS company. So I'm such a believer in it from the very beginning, and seeing it all the way played out. That now I'm doing this full time. It's a fabulous program.
Can you explain the difference between, and I think this is so important, the visionary and the implementer?
Yeah, so the visionary is that person, often the founder of the company, not always, but often, but that person that has the big ideas, that has the big relationships. Often they have a little touch of ADHD. They've got 1,000 ideas, bring 20 to every meeting. An integrator is the person that's kind of beating the drum in the organization. They're the one that's running the day-to-day, that's pulling the leadership team together. And what happens a lot of times is that, especially as you're growing from an entrepreneurial stage and from just startup and on, is you'll get a visionary that's trapped in that integrator seat. And what happens then is you get sort of swings and chaos in the organization. That was certainly what was happening with us. Because a lot of times a visionary just doesn't have the attention span to be able to consistently execute on the day-to-day. Is they hate it. And so it's really important to be able to call that out if that's what you've got going on in your company.
Yeah, no, Brandon, thank you for that. That's awesome. How do people get in touch with you, Brandon?
I will. Yeah, I apologize. I had some technical difficulties, but I'll put my contact information right here in the chat. It's brandon.blell@eosworldwide.com.
Thank you. Well, Brandon, when Brandon brings up the visionary and the implementer, I can't help but think back to my college coach, Dean Smith and Bill Guthridge. Dean Smith was the visionary, the creative mind. And Bill Guthridge was the implementer. He handled all the details, the operations, if you will, of the organization. Coach Smith didn't want to deal with that. He didn't want to deal with, the travel, the scheduling, camp, all that. He let Bill Guthridge do that, and he stayed up at the top and thought about, what system, how was he going to, what offense was he going to run? Who was he going to recruit? What would the program look like the next year, 3 years from now? And, this system can work in any industry, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be small business, small tech, big business, athletics, athletic director, nonprofit. It gives you a framework to operate efficiently, hold people accountable. And I think one of the most important things, avoid the shiny objects. So many people have the shiny object syndrome and I call them bad fish. They're in the water and all of a sudden this shiny lure comes by, they hit it and they get pulled in the boat. And then you've wasted 3 months. So it's read the book Traction, do yourself a favor. Brian Moran,
Yeah, that's a great point that Brandon made and that you followed up on, is that everybody on your team has a role. I remember Mark Eaton wrote a book about the 4 commitments and understanding the role that you play on your team. So who's the visionary? Who's the integrator? Who are the people? Like if you're putting together a team, you can't have 5 second basemen and no outfielders. So, you know, you're hiring for that position. So who's really good in sales, or who, you know, do we need somebody in marketing? What, you know, as you kind of assess the talent on your team, especially in today's marketplace where there are labor issues, you know, you might have a need for 25 employees, but you only have 20. So you say, okay, I'm going to need to redirect some of this talent to fill in the most important spots, but who's my utility infielder? Who can play third, second, and short? You know, who can do sales and marketing? So having that kind of constant assessment of your talent is a way to deal with the contingencies of losing people. Okay, we just lost a good salesman. Who can step up in the interim and fill that role? Without that, you're lost. You know, it'll take you months and transition costs to fill that spot.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's good stuff. Anybody else with any questions or thoughts, or a system you might run or have seen run with success? Anybody new want to introduce yourself to the group? I see Jill Johnson. I see, again, Angel, if I pronounce your name correctly, Angel. Thank you so much for being on the call. It's really cool. Dozy, thank you for being on the call. Really cool to see so many different people. Abe and Fernando. This has been awesome. The other thing that I like about EOS is everyone has a number, and Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know my fellow friends from Long Island will do that, but they don't know EOS. I know Chuck will correct me if I'm wrong. Brian Moran will correct me. Conk, they'll jump all over me. But I like the fact that everyone has a number, so there's no ambiguity, and it drills down really fast. Like even a receptionist, you know, what's your number? Well, if you're a receptionist, your number might be 3. You've got to answer the phone within 3 rings. Everyone has a number. For a salesperson, how many presentations did you make? Because that leads to, if you look at the historical data, that leads to, let's say, 20% sales. So no, those are leading indicators. So you're not lagging and waiting for old data to make decisions on the future. Brandon, can you explain that a little bit further?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. This is sort of the data component of EOS, and it's all about running your business on facts and figures. Oops, sorry about that. Got not on do not disturb. And it's about, there are 2 aspects to it. First is migrating a scorecarding discipline, which Matt just alluded to. And this is really looking at numbers every week that are activity based rather than and leading indicators that you can tweak and change every week, so that you're able to see trends as they pop up, rather than looking back at the end of the month or the end of the quarter and saying what happened. And that discipline is exactly migrated all the way down to the people sweeping the floors, if that's the kind of business that you're in, so that everyone is really driving a number that ultimately is moving your business forward and can be controlled. So it is a fantastic way to really make sure you're focused on that objective, moving the numbers forward.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. Any other thoughts about? Oh, Chuck, you got a question? Go ahead.
I do. So Brandon, thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm glad you could do so. I wanted to ask you a question with regard to EOS and looking at it from a business owner that is preparing to exit. Mm. So my question would be: is if I realize I'm going to be making this transaction, about how long should I implement EOS to really start to see the value and get things, buttoned up so that we can maximize that value?
That's a great question. I guess I could answer it in a couple of ways. So from personal experience, so a typical EOS implementation it is more or less about 2 years, some shorter, some longer, just depends on how great you are at getting it running. Having said that, my company, for example, our family company, we started implementing EOS and wound up selling it just within the process. Now, we weren't doing a big plan around that, but getting clear with the program and getting aligned really helped us make that decision faster. And so I would say it's not ever really too late, because what you're doing is you're creating these great disciplines that are going to make it more valuable for you're just building value in the company, making it easier to exit. In our case, because both of us were running on EOS, it made for a very seamless and smooth transition because we were already speaking the same language. So there's not a specific answer, but it's going to build value whether your plan is to grow the company or to exit the company, regardless.
Well, thank you, Brandon. It was a real treat to have you on the call to supplement Allen Cobb. Yeah, it's really good stuff. I love it. I'm a fan of systems. I've grown up in it, from playing basketball for Bob McKillop at Holy Trinity High School, who's now the head coach at Davidson, to working for him, to playing for Dean Smith, working for Roy Williams. You had to have a system. Otherwise, you're just day to day, flying by the seat of your pants with no real plan. So thank you very much for sharing. We have 5 minutes left. The next meeting is June 7th at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. It's always the first Tuesday of every month. We've had over 50 people today for the first time. Let's continue to grow that. And I love the fact that we've had some women on today, people of color. I'd like to continue to grow that. People of different ages. I think that's terrific. What book are you reading, or books? One of the biggest impacts that a book has had on me, and your life's impacted by 3 things: the books you read, the people you meet, and the trauma in your life, whether it's professional, personal trauma. I read a book, Younger Next Year, that a friend recommended, and I've lost about 13 pounds since. It's changed my outlook on diet and exercise. I'm 60, turned 60 in February, and I highly recommend it for anybody. And there's a woman's version, a male version. Anybody who's approaching 50 or beyond, I think it's a must read. Younger Next Year. The other book I'll challenge you to read is Traction, which is the foundation of EOS. It's really a great read. And for those of you that are looking for a system to implement in your organization, the book Traction will give you a great jump start. Anybody with any parting words or thoughts or questions, or want to say hello? Any new members want to just jump in and introduce yourself? Go ahead, Greg. I ask you to unmute, please.
Pressing unmute, but it wasn't cooperating.
Okay.
First of all, Coach, thanks for the morning. Chuck Clipper, thanks for the invitation. I say semi-retired because I'm one of these people who doesn't do nothing very well. So, but I spent 30 years with Adidas. Unfortunately, North Carolina wore the competitor stuff most of the time when we were there. But listening to all of this, I mean, the system is great. EOS is, as Allen said, it's not the only system in there, and there's certainly ways to look at it. But I think the one thing we have to keep in mind, and the one thing we need to try to convey in any system or in any situation, is a culture where, yes, there's a visionary and there's integrators and there's this army of folks out there who get it done every day, and making sure that everyone feels that sense of importance and knows their role in the overall game and achieving that vision. So, we can keep the system in one's perspective, but really that's where leadership comes into play on how we make sure everybody feels and knows their importance and how these things work out.
Exactly right, Greg. And a couple things. Adidas could have pivoted, had been totally different if they would have given Michael Jordan a little bit more money, because that was his favorite shoe. So, and the other thing is, we've talked about culture on a previous call, and it touched on everything you just mentioned: emotional intelligence, driving behaviors. So thank you. Don, we have 1 minute. Don, close us out.
Hey, my thing is to say thank you to Brian Kennedy Global. He has all this wisdom, and I'm sure he's agreeing with most of these things. The difference in EOS and a coach. Coach, we all need one. Explain the difference.
Well, EOS is a system. You still need a coach. You still need somebody to push you. You still need somebody to hold the bosses accountable, because at the end of the day, the people at the top of the org chart, or I like to say at the bottom of the org chart, if it's a servant leader, they need to be held accountable. And it's who holds them accountable, who holds the visionary accountable, who holds the implementer accountable. Because you don't want EOS to be the flavor of the month. You don't want to start it and then a month later stop it. They need to be pushed to create new habits and new behaviors. So the system is good only if it's executed on a regular basis, and that's where coaching comes in. It is 9 o'clock on the dot. Thank you so much for joining the Rebound Live webcast. We'll see you next month. Anybody want to stay on for just casual conversation? You're welcome to.